Responsibility is the foundation upon which every great life and every great nation is built. When you look across history, you find that societies that rise to prominence do so because they accept the burden of responsibility, not because they complain about injustice or point fingers at others. The same principle applies to your individual life. If you want to transform your circumstances, you cannot wait for external forces to rescue you. You must take ownership of the situation. India's move that shocked the United States is a demonstration of this principle on the global stage. It was not merely an act of political maneuvering, but an act of assuming responsibility for its own destiny. That shift in posture transforms perception. It changes how the world reacts to you. When you take responsibility, you alter reality itself in a profound way. And responsibility is difficult because it requires sacrifice, discipline, and courage. Most people shrink from responsibility because it means they can no longer blame their failures on circumstance, fate, or the actions of others. But think about this carefully. When you refuse responsibility, you hand over your agency, and you resign yourself to being a puppet of forces outside your control. India, for decades, played a cautious role, often bending under global pressure. Yet with one decisive move, it declared that it would no longer operate as a passive participant, but as an agent of its own future. That shocked the U.S., not because America didn't expect India to act, but because it underestimated the power of responsibility to redefine the balance of power. The same underestimation happens in your own life. People will doubt you until you assume responsibility, and then everything changes. And to shoulder responsibility is to carry weight willingly, and weight strengthens you. Imagine a young man who decides to take responsibility for his family, his work, and his education. He might be terrified, overwhelmed, and exhausted, but through that process, he becomes more capable than he ever imagined. Nations work the same way. India took on the weight of saying, "We are responsible for our trajectory, not the dictates of other powers." That weight is heavy because it comes with risk, failure, and the possibility of isolation. But there's no growth without that weight. Think of it like training in the gym. The resistance you choose to lift is the very thing that makes you stronger. Responsibility is resistance, and it builds character, strength, and resilience. Without it, you remain weak and dependent. And the act of responsibility also shatters illusions. Many believe that freedom means doing whatever you want, whenever you want, without consequence. That's a child's definition of freedom. True freedom comes from voluntarily shouldering responsibility, because only then are you capable of sustaining your independence. India shocked the U.S. precisely because it redefined freedom in responsible terms. It said, "We will not be dictated to. We will make our choices even if they disrupt the existing order." That's a terrifying thing for powerful nations to witness because it sets a precedent. It tells the world that even in the presence of overwhelming power, responsibility grants independence. Likewise, when you take full responsibility for your life, others may feel threatened because it reminds them of their own cowardice, but you cannot let that deter you. You must take the burden anyway, and when you live irresponsibly, you sink into chaos. Your health deteriorates, your relationships falter, your career stagnates, and your spirit collapses. Chaos multiplies because you refuse to organize your existence around responsibility. Now imagine a nation that lives that way. Weak alliances, confused leadership, endless compromise. But the moment a nation takes responsibility, the chaos begins to resolve into order. India's decision was an act of ordering chaos, a declaration that it would not be tossed about by global currents but would navigate its own course. This is not merely political, but archetypal. It's the same story as an individual turning their life around by saying, "Enough. I will bear the weight. Responsibility is not glamorous, but it is transformative, and the transformation radiates outward, reshaping everything in its path. And we must understand that responsibility is contagious. When one person steps up, others follow. When one nation asserts its sovereignty, others reconsider their own posture. That is why responsibility is so disruptive. India's move shocked the U.S., not only for its immediate consequences, but because it inspired the imagination of other nations, who suddenly asked themselves, if India can take responsibility for its destiny, why can't we? The same happens in a family, a workplace, or a community. When one individual says, I'll take this on, no matter the cost, it awakens something in others. Responsibility is a signal of strength, and strength is attractive. It pulls others toward higher standards. So when you take responsibility, you don't just change yourself. You change everyone around you. And the paradox is that responsibility feels like a burden, but in truth, it liberates you. Without responsibility, you are enslaved by circumstance. With responsibility, you become the master of your own fate. India chose the latter path, and in doing so, it startled the U.S., because it was not supposed to happen that way. Nations, like people, are expected to stay in their assigned roles, to play by the script written for them. But responsibility tears up the script. It says, we will write our own story, no matter how difficult. And that's what you must do in your own life. Stop playing the role others have assigned you. Assume responsibility, and in doing so, discover what you are truly capable of becoming. And it's important to recognize that responsibility isn't about arrogance or defiance. It's about maturity. India's move wasn't reckless. It was calculated, deliberate, and infused with a sense of duty to its people and future generations. Responsibility is not about selfishness. It's about carrying the weight so others can benefit. That's why it's the highest form of virtue. In your personal life, responsibility may mean working tirelessly to provide for your family, standing firm in your principles even when unpopular, or taking the initiative to repair what's broken. It's not glamorous, and you might not receive applause, but it builds a life of meaning. And meaning is what sustains you when pleasure and comfort fall away. And the ultimate truth is that responsibility transforms both perception and reality. When you say, this is mine to bear, you grow in stature, and the world begins to treat you differently. India shocked the U.S., not because it possessed overwhelming military or economic might, but because it shifted the psychological balance of power. Responsibility changes how you are seen because it changes who you are. It signals strength, competence, and determination. And people, whether individuals or nations, cannot help but respect that. The same applies to you. If you want the world to take you seriously, begin by taking yourself seriously. Carry your burdens with dignity. Accept the weight of responsibility. That is the path to strength, freedom, and respect. Chaos is not merely an external phenomenon. It is the very condition in which we are born. Life begins in disorder, uncertainty, and confusion. We arrive without knowledge, without structure, and without direction. And only gradually do we impose order through discipline and understanding. Nations mirror this process. They begin fractured, unstable, uncertain of their place in the world. The United States once emerged from chaos into global dominance. Now, India has shown it can do the same by seizing an opportunity hidden within disorder. That single move shocked the U.S. because it illustrated how chaos can be transformed into order by decisive action. It is the same lesson you must learn. Chaos will always be there, but what you do with it defines your destiny. And people often assume that chaos is their enemy, something to be feared and avoided at all costs. But chaos is also the birthplace of possibility. Without it, nothing new can emerge. Think of a forest fire. It destroys, but it also clears the ground for new growth. India saw chaos on the world stage, shifting alliances, economic uncertainty, and the fractures of a changing order. Where others saw danger, India saw possibility. That is courage, and you must apply that to your own life. When everything around you seems to collapse, that is not the end. It is the beginning of something that can be shaped, if you have the discipline to act. Chaos is frightening, but it is also the soil from which greatness emerges. And what separates those who are crushed by chaos from those who thrive is the ability to act decisively. Most people freeze when life collapses around them. They wait, they hide, they hope someone else will impose order. But waiting only deepens the chaos until it swallows you whole. India chose not to wait. It imposed its will on disorder, and in doing so, it caught the world off guard. That is what power truly is, the capacity to create order where none exists. You can do the same in your personal life. When your finances, relationships, or career feel like they are unraveling, you must not shrink. You must decide on one clear step and take it. That one move can change everything, just as India's move shifted the global balance. And the relationship between chaos and order is archetypal, as old as humanity itself. In every ancient story, the hero ventures into the unknown, confronts the dragon, and retrieves the treasure. The dragon is chaos. It is danger, destruction, and uncertainty. But the treasure is order, the possibility that emerges when you conquer what terrifies you most. India stepped into the unknown when it made its decisive move, confronting the chaos of global politics, and what emerged was a new form of order that even the U.S. had to acknowledge. You must confront your own dragons. The chaos in your life, fear, doubt, and suffering, is precisely where the treasure lies. You cannot avoid it. You must face it. That is how you bring order to your world. And many believe order is simply stability, but stability without responsibility decays into stagnation. True order is the integration of chaos into a structured form that produces growth. Nations that grow complacent eventually decline because they stop renewing themselves through confrontation with chaos. India's bold move was a refusal to remain stagnant. It accepted the risk of disruption in order to carve out a new role for itself. That is how you must live. If you cling desperately to comfort and routine, you prevent yourself from evolving. Only by stepping into the unknown can you renew your life. Order is not static, it is dynamic, born from the constant dance with chaos. Without that dance, both individuals and nations perish. And it is tempting to believe that chaos can be eliminated, but that is an illusion. Chaos is permanent. The universe itself is built on entropy, the gradual drift toward disorder. What matters is not the elimination of chaos, but the creation of meaning within it. India shocked the U.S. by proving it could navigate chaos with intention rather than being consumed by it. The same applies to you. You cannot eliminate suffering, failure, or unpredictability, but you can orient yourself so that those forces become catalysts rather than obstacles. That requires courage and clarity. It requires you to ask, what am I aiming at? What order am I trying to build? Without a vision, chaos will scatter you. With a vision, chaos becomes fuel for transformation, and when you confront chaos, you inevitably encounter fear. Fear is the signal that you are stepping into territory you do not understand. Most people interpret fear as a sign to retreat, but fear is actually the invitation to grow. India's move was frightening not only for others, but also for itself, because it risked consequences from a superpower. Yet it pressed forward, and in doing so, it expanded its capacity. You must learn to treat fear as an ally, a compass pointing to the areas of life where transformation is possible. If you only act where you are comfortable, you remain who you are. But if you act where you are afraid, you become more than you are. That is the essence of order emerging from chaos. and the balance between chaos and order must be carefully managed. Too much chaos and you dissolve into anxiety and collapse. Too much order and you suffocate in rigidity and decline. The secret is to walk the line between them, to live where challenge is great enough to provoke growth, but not so great as to annihilate you. India walked that line. It did not plunge recklessly into disorder, but neither did it cling timidly to stability. It made a calculated move, one that carried risk but also immense potential. That balance is what you must seek. Take on responsibility that stretches you but does not destroy you. That is where meaning lies, on the edge between chaos and order, where life is both dangerous and worthwhile. And chaos has a strange way of revealing character. When everything is falling apart, the true nature of individuals and nations is exposed. Some collapse under pressure, while others rise to heights they never thought possible. India's decision revealed resilience, confidence, and the courage to confront the unknown. The U.S. was shocked not only by the act itself, but by the character it revealed. The same is true in your personal life. When chaos comes, and it always does, your response will reveal who you truly are. Will you surrender to despair, or will you act with responsibility and courage? That choice determines whether you remain a victim of chaos or the architect of order. And the deeper truth is that chaos is inevitable, but despair is optional. You cannot control the storms of life, but you can decide how to sail through them. That decision is the core of human freedom. India shocked the U.S. because it exercised that freedom with boldness, refusing to let chaos dictate its path. You too must realize that your freedom lies in the choice to act meaningfully within disorder. Do not wait for the world to stabilize, because it never will. Instead, build stability in yourself and radiate it outward. The world may always be chaotic, but you can bring order into your corner of it. That is not only your responsibility, it is your destiny. To stand against giants is not simply a political metaphor, but a psychological reality that confronts every one of us. Giants are the overwhelming forces in life, institutions, circumstances, or personal demons that appear too vast to overcome. Most people retreat in the face of such power because it is safer to submit than to resist. But safety gained through submission is an illusion, because it comes at the price of your soul. India's act of defiance shocked the United States precisely because it was unexpected from a nation long considered secondary in global affairs. That move was not only political, it was archetypal, the smaller figure standing up to the towering presence. And that is what makes it inspiring, both on the level of nations and on the level of individuals who face their own giants every day. And the history of human progress is the story of those who dared to confront giants. David facing Goliath is more than a biblical tale. It is the eternal narrative of courage in the face of overwhelming odds. Every technological revolution, every social transformation, every artistic breakthrough has been the product of someone willing to confront a force that seemed insurmountable. India's refusal to bend before the U.S. followed this same pattern. It showed that size and dominance are not the only determinants of power. What matters is conviction, unity, and the willingness to carry risk. In your own life, your giants might not be geopolitical powers, but financial debt, fear of failure, or the weight of family expectations. They feel just as intimidating, but they too can be faced. And to stand against a giant is not the same as to win against one. Victory is never guaranteed, and the odds are often stacked heavily against you. But the very act of standing alters reality, because it shifts the balance of perception. India may not surpass the United States overnight, but by daring to assert its sovereignty, it forced the world to reevaluate the terms of power. That is what you must understand. Your giants lose their absolute authority the moment you resist them. They remain large, but they are no longer invincible. Courage is not about eliminating fear. It is about moving forward despite it. When you act with courage, you transform the playing field even before the outcome is decided. And fear of giants is rooted in our biological history. Human beings are wired to respect size, dominance, and strength. For millennia, survival often meant submission to the stronger. Yet, our greatest achievements have come from transcending that instinct, from using intelligence, strategy, and resilience to overcome superior force. India's decision was strategic. It did not meet strength with brute strength, but with calculated defiance. Likewise, when you face your personal giants, you need not overpower them directly. You must outthink them, outlast them, and refuse to yield to despair. The brain is more powerful than brute force, and courage magnifies intelligence. That is how small nations survive among empires, and that is how individuals rise despite impossible odds. And giants thrive on intimidation. They convince you that resistance is futile, and once you believe that, they win without lifting a finger. The United States has long projected itself as the inevitable leader of the world order, and many nations accepted this without question. India's move shattered that illusion by proving that even giants can be resisted. The same principle applies in your life. Your giants are not undefeatable, but they want you to believe they are. That is why courage is so critical. The first battle is psychological. The moment you decide to resist, you reclaim your dignity and agency. You may not win immediately, but you have already broken the spell of inevitability, and that is the first step toward transformation. And standing against giants is costly, and that is why so few attempt it. The risk of failure, punishment, and isolation is real. India risked economic retaliation, diplomatic backlash, and global criticism, yet it acted anyway. That is the essence of courage, not recklessness, but the willingness to bear suffering for the sake of a greater good. In your life, the cost may be rejection, financial loss, or ridicule, but ask yourself, what is the cost of submission? What is the price of living small, never daring, never asserting your own sovereignty? The truth is, the price of submission is your soul, and no external comfort can compensate for that loss. Better to risk defeat than to live in chains, and giants are necessary because they give us something worthy to oppose. Without giants, there is no growth, no heroism, no transformation. If everything were easy, you would remain stagnant, untested, and undeveloped. Giants force you to discover capacities you didn't know you had. India discovered its own strength by standing against a superpower. You will discover your own strength only by confronting what terrifies you. This is why challenges are not merely obstacles, they are opportunities for greatness. The giant defines the hero. Without opposition, there is no story, no meaning. So the very presence of giants in your life is not a curse but a summons to courage, to responsibility, to the realization of your highest potential. And it is important to understand that standing against giants does not always mean confrontation in the physical sense. Sometimes it means refusing to accept lies or daring to speak truth where silence has been demanded. It may mean standing firm in your values when compromise would be easier. India's stance was not merely military or economic. It was moral. It was a declaration of self-respect, of the refusal to be diminished. In your own life, courage often takes this subtler form. It may be the courage to say no, the courage to endure loneliness, the courage to hold onto integrity when others mock it. These acts may seem small compared to global politics, but in essence, they are the same struggle. The refusal to bow to giants. And when you stand against giants, you inspire others to do the same. Courage is contagious. India's move shocked not only the United States, but also awakened other nations to possibilities they had not considered. The ripple effect of courage cannot be overstated. In your life, when you dare to confront what others fear, you give them permission to confront their own battles. A family member, a colleague, or a friend may see your act of defiance and find the strength to rise. That is why courage is not merely personal, but communal. You carry not only your own dignity, but the hopes of those who look to you. Giants fall not because of one person, but because courage spreads like fire. And ultimately, to stand against giants is to affirm that you are more than your fear, more than your circumstances, more than the limitations imposed on you. India shocked the United States by affirming its place in history through one courageous act. You can shock the world in your own way by refusing to submit to the giants that dominate your life. It does not mean you will never stumble or suffer. It means you choose to act regardless, and that choice alone changes the story. The world respects those who resist giants because it reminds us of the best within ourselves. And so the lesson is clear. Do not shrink before the towering forces of life. Stand, and in standing, you become more than you ever imagined. The future is not a distant, abstract concept waiting to reveal itself. It is being written right now in every choice you make. People often imagine their destiny as something handed down from the heavens or imposed by external powers, but that belief is a way of escaping responsibility. The truth is that the trajectory of your life is determined by the quality of your decisions. India shocked the world because it proved this at a national level. With one decision, it altered global expectations and forced even the United States to reconsider its assumptions. That moment illustrates the profound truth. One act, chosen deliberately and carried out with conviction, can change the entire course of history. And the same principle applies to you, and most people underestimate the power of a single choice. They think change requires monumental effort, endless preparation, or external permission. But every transformation, personal or political, begins with one act of will. India's decision did not emerge from a vacuum. It emerged from years of pressure, uncertainty, and hesitation, until finally, one moment tipped the scales. You too carry within you that moment of decision. Perhaps it is the choice to change careers, to speak the truth you've been hiding, or to leave behind what is destroying you. The decision will terrify you because it feels irreversible, but that is its power. The decision anchors a new path, and from that anchor, the future unfolds differently. And a single decision matters because it reorients your entire map of meaning. Before you act, the future stretches ahead in countless possibilities, undefined and chaotic. Once you decide, the path narrows, and your vision becomes focused. That focus creates energy, because you no longer wander aimlessly. You pursue a direction with purpose. India's decision created clarity, not only for itself but for the world. Suddenly, its role was no longer that of a passive participant but an assertive power. The same occurs in your life when you make a choice that defines you. The indecision that drains your spirit evaporates, and a new momentum emerges. With each decisive act, you bring the future into sharper relief, and it becomes something you can actually shape. And one reason people avoid decisive action is fear of responsibility. Once you choose, you own the consequences. You can no longer hide behind excuses or blame others for your circumstances. But this ownership is precisely what grants power. India assumed ownership of its destiny with its move, accepting the risks as well as the potential rewards. You must do the same. To decide is to say, "This is my path, and I will bear the consequences." That kind of commitment is frightening because it removes escape routes. Yet it is only through commitment that greatness is forged. Without it, you drift, tossed about by the whims of others. With it, you become the author of your own story, and that authorship is worth every burden. And every great story, whether personal or historical, hinges on a pivotal choice. Consider the individual who decides to overcome addiction. That one choice, repeated daily, reshapes not only their life but the lives of everyone around them. Consider the leader who decides to stand for justice when silence would be easier. That one act inspires a generation. India's move fits into this archetype. A single decision, made in defiance of overwhelming pressure, shifts the arc of history. You too are living within a story waiting for a pivotal decision. The question is whether you will choose the path of courage or the path of fear. That choice cannot be avoided. Even refusing to choose is itself a decision for stagnation. And the power of one decision lies not only in its immediate effect, but in its compounding consequences. Decisions ripple outward like stones thrown into a pond. One act of courage inspires more courage. One step toward order creates momentum for further order. India's decision will not be the last. It set into motion a series of events that will shape its future for decades. In your life, one choice may seem small at first, but it establishes a precedent. If you choose to act with integrity once, you are more likely to do it again. If you choose to confront fear today, tomorrow's fears shrink. The momentum of decisions builds character, and character builds destiny. That is how futures are written, one act at a time. And another reason decisions are powerful is that they redefine identity. Before India made its move, it was seen as hesitant, deferential, dependent on the goodwill of larger powers. Afterward, it was perceived as assertive, independent, and willing to disrupt the status quo. Nothing else about the nation changed overnight. Its population, economy, and geography were the same. What changed was the perception of its identity, both to itself and to the world. Your choices function the same way. The moment you decide to act differently, you begin to see yourself differently, and others follow suit. One decision can turn a victim into a leader, a bystander into a participant, and a dreamer into a builder. That is the miracle of decision. And decision-making is an act of faith because the future remains uncertain. No matter how carefully you plan, you cannot guarantee the outcome. That uncertainty paralyzes many who wait endlessly for the perfect moment, the perfect assurance that they will not fail. But the perfect moment never comes. India did not act because the path was clear. It acted because waiting any longer would have meant forfeiting its future. You too must act in faith, trusting that courage itself generates possibility. The outcome may not match your expectations, but the act of deciding transforms you, and that transformation is worth more than certainty. Faith is not blind belief. It is the courage to move forward when clarity is impossible. And the weight of one decision also lies in its moral significance. When you choose, you declare your values, you say to yourself and to the world, this is what matters most. India's move was not only strategic but symbolic. It communicated that sovereignty and dignity were non-negotiable. That declaration reverberated globally because values carry more weight than calculations alone. In your life, every decision reveals what you truly value, regardless of what you claim. If you choose comfort over growth, that reveals your values. If you choose truth over convenience, that too reveals your values. Decisions write the moral fabric of your life, line by line, and the accumulation of those lines is your legacy. And the final truth is that decisions are the levers of destiny. The world is chaotic, unpredictable, and filled with forces beyond your control. But within that chaos you possess the power of choice. India shocked the world by pulling one lever, shifting the machinery of history in a new direction. You cannot control the universe, but you can decide how you will act within it. That power is both terrifying and liberating. It means your future is not written by chance or by others. It is written by you. Every moment offers a choice, and every choice is a seed planted in the soil of time. Plant wisely, act courageously, and you will see how one decision can indeed rewrite the future.